February 1st, 2026 is not a date that will necessarily cause silver prices to spike immediately. Very likely, when you open the chart that morning, everything will still look normal. But some changes do not appear on charts. They appear in places few people look: warehouses, shipping schedules, dealers' price lists. And when those places change, the market has already turned in a different direction. I am not talking about bans, not talking about seizures. What is approaching is something far more subtle: friction, an extra layer of cost, an extra layer of delay, an extra reason for physical silver flows to no longer move as smoothly as before. And when flows slow in a market that is already tight, the result does not need to be announced. It reveals itself. Products become harder to find, premiums thicken, delivery times stretch out. It sounds hard to believe, but pause. This does not require a crisis. It only requires the right trigger at the right moment, in a system heavily dependent on global supply chains. Because metal does not move according to market sentiment. It moves by ships, warehouses, and contracts. And when those links begin to clog, you can witness a very familiar paradox. Price screens remain calm, while the ability to buy disappears. So what is this analysis really about, if not silver prices? This analysis states one thing directly. Starting February 1st, 2026, the greatest risk to silver no longer lies in price, but in the ability to obtain physical silver at the moment you need it. You may see spot prices barely change. ETFs continue trading normally. Yet when you actually want to buy deliverable silver, the distribution system may no longer function as it did before. The core issue here is the supply chain. When a new layer of cost is applied to key import routes, silver does not vanish, but its flow slows. And in a market already dependent on thin inventories and international shipping, slow effectively means scarce. That is why this piece does not ask, how high will silver go? It asks a more practical question. When you need silver, will you be able to buy it? And to answer that question, we have to look at the part most articles avoid. Most analyses out there are talking about politics. Who is pressuring whom? Who is retaliating against whom? Which countries are being targeted? Those debates may be loud, but they do not touch what markets truly care about. Markets do not argue. Markets measure flows. What very few people state clearly is this: silver is not priced or distributed primarily based on where it is mined. A very large share of silver's real liquidity comes from intermediary infrastructure, where silver is refined, standardized, warehoused, ownership is recorded, and only then released into circulation when demand spikes. And that infrastructure is heavily concentrated in a few specific hubs, particularly in Europe. This leads to a dangerous misunderstanding. People say, there is still plenty of silver in the world. That statement may be technically true, but it is almost meaningless in practical terms. Because silver that exists somewhere is not the same as silver that can be delivered to you in time, at a premium a dealer is willing to quote. When the distribution system is disrupted, that metal, even if it still sits in a warehouse, is, economically speaking, effectively locked. In other words, the issue is not whether silver still exists, but whether silver can still circulate. And the gap between those two realities is where real risk forms. To understand this more clearly, we need to look at how silver actually moves through the system, not how it is discussed in news headlines. If you want to understand why a policy change can make silver hard to buy without prices having to spike, you have to look at the metal's real-world path, not on charts, but in the operational life of the market. Silver does not go straight from the mine to your hands. It passes through very specific intermediaries, and each segment has limits. Typically, silver is refined at facilities that meet international standards, then standardized into forms eligible for circulation. From there, it enters the warehousing system, where ownership is recorded, categorized, and made ready to be activated when large demand emerges. Only after this step does silver truly become liquid, meaning it can be sold, transferred, and delivered to specification. The problem is that this system is not evenly distributed across the map. A critically important portion of refining, warehousing, and wholesale distribution infrastructure is concentrated in Europe, with London playing a central role. Not because Europe holds all the silver, but because it holds the standards, accounting rules, warehouse networks, and shipping routes that allow silver to be activated quickly when demand surges. This distinction is crucial. Silver sitting in a warehouse somewhere in the world does not mean it is ready to flow into the U.S. market when buyers arrive simultaneously. If a single link along that route becomes more expensive, slower, or less reliable, the entire flow decelerates. And when flow slows in a market that already relies on thin inventories, the consequences appear very quickly. Imagine water in a piping system. The water is still in the tank, but if the pipe narrows, the pressure at the tap immediately changes. You do not need the water to disappear to feel a shortage. You only need it to not arrive in time. And it is precisely here that a number that looks small on paper begins to become a powerful lever in reality. To understand why a seemingly minor change can tighten the physical market very quickly, we have to dismantle the day-to-day operating mechanism of silver from the perspective of those who must deliver metal, not those who only watch prices. There are no sensational secrets here, just ordinary components that, when placed side by side, create significant pressure. The first point that needs to be clarified is that tariffs never stand alone. In headlines, you see 10%. In reality, that 10% pulls an entire chain of costs with it. Imported silver is declared by value. Insurance is calculated based on declared value. Working capital financing is calculated on the value of goods in transit. Warehousing is charged by time. Handling and loading are charged by volume. And when the future becomes less certain, a risk buffer is added, not because someone is greedy, but because no one wants to lose money on the next shipment. This is where many people are misled by round numbers. They think 10% is just 10%, but costs do not arrive alone. They arrive as a group. They stack. And when they stack, the impact at the point of sale is rarely just 10%. It is usually higher, and more importantly, unpredictable. And in the physical commodity business, what kills planning fastest is not high costs, but unpredictable costs. From here, dealers' behavior becomes very easy to understand if you have ever watched them operate during supply stress. The first thing they do is not push prices to make more money. They manage inventory. When inbound flow becomes uncertain, dealers need to extend the lifespan of the silver they have. The most effective way to do that is to raise premiums to slow demand. Not to exclude customers, but to allocate time. When demand slows, they gain breathing room to wait for the next shipment, if that shipment still arrives. At the same time, they narrow their product lineup. Low-margin products, which also mean higher risk when costs fluctuate, are cut first. What remains are forms they can restock fastest, or that have enough premium room to absorb volatility. And a very small but extremely telling change appears: price lock times shorten. Those price held for 5 minutes countdowns are not decorative. When the system is under strain, they shrink. No one wants to commit to a price while underlying costs are drifting. If you have ever witnessed a dealer being cleaned out in a matter of hours, you understand this rhythm. In the morning, inventory looks sufficient. By midday, notes appear. Call for availability. By afternoon, temporarily suspending new orders. This does not happen because everyone suddenly becomes a silver expert. It happens because the same fear touches everyone at once. If I wait, will I still be able to buy? And when that question arises simultaneously, the shelves answer faster than any debate. Here, we need to pause to distinguish between two worlds that many people conflate: paper and physical. The paper world gives you price exposure. You buy, you see a number, you feel you have exposure to silver. The physical world gives you ownership, the ability to hold, deliver, use, or resell when needed. In normal times, these two worlds move closely together, so the difference is obscured. But when supply chains tighten, the gap opens. And that gap usually opens before charts react. This is the part that confuses many people. They see spot prices calm, ETFs trading normally, screens showing no alarms. Meanwhile, real-world premiums climb, delivery times lengthen, terms change. You can find yourself in a very strange situation. Your paper position is up 5 to 10%, while physical buyers are paying 30 to 40% more to get silver in hand. This is not theory. It has happened in many forms whenever supply tightens. And it happens because price reflects expectations, while premiums reflect reality. But if it were only retail demand, the story would still be manageable. What truly tightens the market is industrial demand. Silver is not just a hoarding metal. It is a working metal. Solar panels require silver paste. Circuit boards require silver contacts. Medical devices require silver for conductivity and antibacterial properties. These industries do not change materials overnight. They have certifications, processes, contracts, and production lines. When supply slows, they do not say we'll wait. They compete to buy. This is forced demand. Forced demand does not bargain like retail. If a production line is worth millions per day, they will pay more to avoid shutdowns. And when they do, retail is pushed to the back. Not because anyone dislikes retail, but because those who can pay more and offer stability get priority. This is the cold reality of supply chains. When it coincides with a policy deadline, pressure multiplies very quickly. At this point, many people will point to inventory figures to reassure themselves. And this is where a common illusion needs to be clarified. Inventory is not a homogeneous pile. In futures trading systems, inventory is classified. There is metal that meets specifications and could be delivered if the owner chooses. And there is metal that has been specifically designated as ready for delivery against contracts. The two are not the same. In times of stress, metal that can be delivered does not automatically become metal that will be delivered. Owners have the right to hold it back. So when you hear a large number, the right question is not how much, but which portion can flow out immediately, and is that portion changing quickly or slowly? The deliverable portion is the first to be choked. When it contracts, the system's response is not silence. Leverage is pulled, margins are raised, rules are adjusted, cash settlement becomes more attractive. Each lever sends the same message: the physical market is tight. And that message often triggers a second wave of buying, not because someone read an announcement, but because they sense delivery risk. Here I need to state plainly something that may be uncomfortable. Tariffs do not appear in real life as a neat plus 10% line item. They appear as friction, unexpected fees, delays, changes in terms. And friction is where supply chains break. When costs jump abruptly, those who move goods fastest win. Everyone else stands aside to wait and see. While they wait, the goods are gone. I have seen this in real life. In the same morning, a dealer is still taking orders. By noon, they switch to reconfirm availability. By afternoon, they stop. There is no press release, only reality. Another misunderstanding that needs clearing up concerns the role of hubs. Many people hear London or Europe and think these are merely pricing centers. They are not. They are places with warehouses, routes, and standards. Large institutions do not move any metal. They move bars that meet standards within warehouse networks governed by clear legal rules. When one part of that network becomes more expensive or slower, the entire ability to activate liquidity declines. Saying there is still plenty of silver in the world, in this context, may be technically true but practically useless. That silver may already be spoken for, locked up, or not worth shipping at the new cost level. All these pieces fit together into a very familiar sequence. There is an announcement, then a deadline, then positioning, then a buying rush, then delays, then premiums rise, then allocation. After that, the market splits in two: those who already have metal and those who are looking for metal. The latter pay more, if they can still find it. This sequence does not require spot prices to spike sharply. It only requires confidence in the flow to weaken. If you ask me which part of this story is most often underestimated, it is expectations about the next step. Even when the initial impact seems manageable, anticipating a further escalation often accelerates behavior sooner. People do not wait for the next milestone to react. They react because they see the next milestone approaching. Expectations pull reality forward. And when reality arrives early, the room for adjustment disappears. I know this can sound like connecting too many dots, but that is exactly how markets operate when viewed from the ground up. There is no single explosion. There are many small changes moving in the same direction at the same time. And when they synchronize, the result is greater than the sum of its parts. This is why, in periods like these, people say don't wait for confirmation from the chart. Not because charts are useless, but because charts confirm late. Premiums do not. If you are still thinking, I'll just wait and see, I understand. Waiting is a natural reflex. But in this story, time is the scarce variable. Each passing day, the same quantity of silver is being chased by more people. And when you wait until the system officially adjusts, you no longer have choices. You only have terms. And this is the moment to shift perspective, because what is happening is not a shock, but a switch. At this point, the crucial shift in perspective is this. The event being discussed is not a shock, but a switch. It does not create problems from zero. It activates pressures that already exist within the system. Thin inventories, long transport chains, cost sensitivity, and human behavior that synchronizes easily when a deadline appears. A switch does not need to make a loud noise. It only needs to change state. Before, people accept risk because flows are smooth. After, the same risk suddenly becomes unacceptable because everyone can see the bottleneck ahead. And that moment when expectations change is when the market shifts phase. This is why many people misunderstand the role of buyers. They say, shortages only happen when people rush to buy. Not exactly. Buying does not create the shortage. It reveals it. Just like a shop with 10 items on the shelf, there are always only 10. It is only when 100 people look at them at once that the problem becomes visible. In this context, a deadline does not force the market to react immediately on the chart. It forces people to react in real life. Dealers change terms, industrial buyers lock in supply, sellers hold inventory longer. Those reactions propagate faster than any technical indicator. So if you wait for a clear signal from price to confirm, you are very likely waiting until after the switch has already been flipped. And at that point, the choice is no longer yours. To remember this, there is a very simple system metaphor, and we need it right now. Keep a very simple image in mind. A small shop with 10 items on the shelf. No more, no less. Outside, 100 people pass by every day. On normal days, no one pays attention. Each person assumes they can come back and buy when needed. Those 10 items look as if they are always there. Then one morning, there is news that the shop is about to change its opening hours. No one knows exactly how inconvenient it will be, only that it will be harder than before. So people begin stopping by earlier. Not everyone at once, but enough to create a strange feeling. And when the 10th person walks out holding the last item, those who remain finally realize an uncomfortable truth. Those 10 items were always just 10. The shortage does not appear on that day. It was always there. What changed was the perception of time. Those who understood early were able to buy. Those who understood late are left standing outside, wondering why. That is exactly how the silver market operates when supply chains tighten. Silver does not need to disappear from the world. It only requires people to realize, all at once, that waiting is no longer safe. And from here, the question is no longer, is there a shortage or not, but which side of the door you are standing on. In periods like this, markets rarely speak through obvious price jumps. They speak through behavior, through small changes repeated often enough to form a pattern. The way sellers quote prices, the way they promise delivery, and the way they rewrite lines that once seemed harmless on product pages. When those behaviors change simultaneously, the market has already shifted states, even if the chart remains silent. If you begin to see dealers stop committing to delivery times, that is not an administrative detail. It is a signal that they are no longer certain about the next shipment. If, in stock, gradually turns into ships in 2 to 4 weeks, then into call for availability, understand that delivery risk has moved ahead of price. And if premiums rise while spot prices remain nearly flat, that is not a paradox. It is the physical market reflecting real conditions. Pay attention to shipping language as well. As deadlines approach, wording often changes very subtly, from guaranteed delivery to estimated, from price locked to subject to confirmation. These changes are not meant to cause panic. They are how the system protects itself when flows become unpredictable. Remember this, spot prices confirm late. They react after those who actually handle the metal have already adjusted. Premiums whisper earlier. Deliverability tells the truth immediately. If you wait for the chart to be sure, you are very likely waiting until after conditions have already changed. So in this context, what matters is not prediction, but observing conditions that are deteriorating simultaneously. When that happens, the market does not need more evidence to react. It has already reacted, just not on your screen. When the story is put back in its proper place, action here does not mean rushing to buy out of fear, but determining which arena you are playing in and observing the signals relevant to that arena. First, be very clear. Are you seeking price exposure or ownership? The two are not the same, and in a period of supply chain stress, the difference between them becomes very expensive. If the goal is ownership, then the most important thing is not catching the bottom, but ensuring delivery. With physical silver, speed and reliability are worth more than saving a few dollars in premium. When the system is smooth, you can compare endlessly. When the system begins to stall, choosing a reputable source, placing a decisive order, and stepping out of the comparison spiral is how risk is reduced. Endless browsing does not help you buy cheaper. It only helps you buy later. Watch dealers' language as a signal. When you see delivery times being extended, price lock terms shortening, or subject to confirmation appearing more frequently, the market is telling you that flows are no longer certain. At the same time, observe premiums relative to spot. Premiums often reflect stress earlier than any indicator on a chart. When the metal arrives, inspect it immediately, weight, dimensions, magnetism, and keep the documentation. This may sound minor, but it is part of ownership discipline, not a ceremonial formality. Then store it safely and discreetly. Privacy is a component of security, especially when access becomes an issue. Finally, do not let perfection become the enemy of action. You do not need a beautiful portfolio. You need real exposure to metal within a time window that precedes changing conditions. A small but certain position is always better than a perfect plan executed too late. And if you are observing, remember this: the window for action does not close with a loud noise. It closes as choices quietly disappear, one by one. At this point, I do not want to draw conclusions for you. I want to ask the right questions, because in periods like this, how you think matters as much as what you do. If the conditions we have discussed begin to appear at the same time, delivery times lengthening, premiums leading prices, sales language becoming more cautious, how will you respond? Will you buy immediately to prioritize certainty, even if it means accepting higher costs? Will you wait, trusting that the system will self-correct and supply will return to normal? Or will you change strategy, shift to a different form of exposure, accepting a trade-off between ownership and flexibility? There is no single correct answer for everyone. There is only the answer that fits your objectives. Another question is just as important. Do you believe these policy changes will remain in place through the next milestones? Or do you think they will be loosened before their impact spreads? Markets often react not to the final decision, but to expectations of that decision. And expectations, once formed, are very difficult to reverse. I want to hear how you are thinking, not to debate winners and losers, but to understand how this community reads signals. Because many costly decisions do not come from choosing the wrong direction, but from delaying after conditions have already changed. So the final question for you is this: are you actively choosing a strategy, or are you waiting for the market to force you to choose? If this analysis helped you connect the pieces, from policy to supply chains to market behavior, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Not to chase breaking news, but to follow mechanisms as they operate slowly, quietly, and are often overlooked until it is too late. We are not trying to predict every move in price. We focus on flows, conditions, and early signals, the things that determine whether you still have choices when everyone else begins arguing. If you value this type of analysis, leave a short comment below. I read them to understand how this community is observing the market, not to seek total agreement. And if you want to go deeper, the next video on the channel will break down how physical markets often react before charts have time to say anything, not only with silver, but with other commodities that have gone through similar phases. Turn on notifications so you do not miss it. Remember this before you leave: silver does not punish you for choosing the wrong direction. It punishes you for arriving late after access conditions have changed. If you decide not to act, let that be a conscious decision, not the result of delay. Subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.